An Israeli airstrike on the Gaza Strip kills more than 23 civilians, including 13 in the northern region. UNICEF calls for an immediate cessation of attacks on civilians and humanitarian workers in Gaza. And the Iranian Revolutionary Guard warns the United States and Israel that Tehran will respond decisively to the recent Israeli attacks. It's 4 p.m. Cairo local time, and you're now watching Qnews. We begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Gaza. The Palestinian media reported that 23 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip, including 13 in the northern region. The Palestinian Civil Defense confirmed over 1,300 deaths in northern Gaza in less than a month due to the Israeli assault. 5 Palestinians were killed and several others injured after Israeli shelling that targeted a house in Beit Lahia, while additional strikes in Tal al-Hawa resulted in casualties. Israeli naval forces also bombarded western areas of Al-Nasirat camp, and airstrikes targeted multiple locations in northern Gaza. The Palestinian Ministry of Health has urged international and humanitarian organizations to send medical and surgical teams to hospitals in northern Gaza, particularly to Kamal Adwan Hospital. The ministry further called for facilitating the arrival of these teams and providing ambulances to transport the wounded and sick to the hospitals. The Palestinian Authorities Commission for Detainees Affairs has reported that at least 16 Palestinians, including children and former detainees, were arrested in the West Bank overnight. Since the onset of the Israeli assault, over 11,500 Palestinians from the West Bank, including Jerusalem, have been detained. Families of Israeli hostages have accused Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of undermining detainees' exchange deals, claiming that he is the main obstacle to their return. In a statement, they allege that Netanyahu is pursuing partial agreements to thwart any comprehensive deal, prioritizing his personal interests over the captives' fates.
הוא הדוגמה לכל מה שיפה ונכון בעם ישראל. הוא גם סמל לרוח הלחימה ולערכים בלתי מתפשרים.
And for more analysis, we now move to Mona in our newsroom. To you, Mona.
Thank you so much, Hala. And for further analysis on the current escalating tensions in Gaza, we're joined from Ramallah by political researcher Dr. Tamara Haddad. Welcome to Qnews.
Thank you very much. You're most welcome.
Thank you so much. And in your opinion, why do the occupying forces repeatedly return to certain areas in the Gaza Strip despite having previously withdrawn from them?
I mean, it is undeniable that this is happening, and there is intense shelling of several areas of Gaza, and I believe this is targeting definitely Palestinians, especially that many Palestinians started to come out and to live, to try to maintain this sort of normalcy in life. And in fact, and I must say that this is a further escalation of the war, and I believe also that this is some sort of adding further pressure on the Gaza Strip, both militarily and in the daily living of civilians there. This is directly affecting the civilian population, the Palestinian civilian population, and and I believe that this is certainly not a way to further pressure the release of hostages. And I believe that many of the terms that have to be applied and the conditions that have to be respected in this respect will require introducing a truce and a ceasefire as early as possible. But unfortunately, without the release of hostages, nothing will mean that the escalation of the military assaults will increase. And it is obvious that the direct target is to further pressure the civil population to remain indoors and and this is certainly affecting the strategic far reach of the assault and one way or another, this is also putting pressure on Hamas to demilitarize the area and to surrender their weapons and lay down their arms. And this is probably one form of the Israelis imposing their conditions by force and went to thwart the military action in Gaza.
Yes, the Palestinian Ministry of Health has urgently called for the international medical teams and resources. Now, what obstacles are preventing this assistance? And from your point of view, what's your take on the international community's response so far to the very dire situation of the humanitarian aspect in Gaza?
It is understandable the humanitarian crisis is really reaching very far proportions, and this is definitely affecting the civilian population in depth. And I believe that even 98% of the population has at one point been affected by the military activity there. There is a frank violation also of human rights, and these people are in need of humanitarian aid, and any form of aid practically has to reach Gaza. The entire strip is suffering. The suffering of severe shortages, and the actual blockade that the Israeli occupation is imposing on the Gaza Strip is really reaching its peak. And of late, this is really becoming unbearable. In many cases, the Palestinians are suffering from even a severe deterioration of under health issues that are really taking their toll on their life and their mortality and morbidity. And I must say the hospitals are incurring much of the brunt of the result, and it is obvious that such a call for help should be warranted, given that there is no other possibility. This is also in violation of the situation of prisoners of war under the Geneva Convention. And I believe that the Palestinians have no other reach but to call for external help, and this is again warranted by the dire situation on the ground. And this is truly an open war that is being led, and whether on the Israeli side or on the Palestinian side, the situation is finally affecting victims that are children, often women, and Gaza Strip is really seeing a dramatic situation there. There are also a lot of side talks that are trying to impose a truce or a ceasefire, and I believe that this is truly very important, at least to save the humanitarian situation on the ground, and at least to ensure some sort of safer haven in the near future, so as to allow the humanity to be restored to the entire strip. This is a humanitarian situation that is really beyond description, and again, I have to say that it's a natural cry for help that is issued from the Palestinian side, and and I hope that people respond to this at least positively. And there are of course certain countries already deal with the local Palestinian authorities in this respect, but unfortunately I know that the Israelis are not willing to see this happen. So this is further compounding the situation and
Yes.
further compounding the humanitarian crisis that is already reaching a very dire level.
Yes, Dr. Tamara, given the heavy casualties reported, especially among civilians, what legal or political mechanisms that are available to the Palestinian Authority or the Palestinian civil society to address the human rights violations committed so far? Again, let me here repeat the question. Given the heavy casualties that are reported, especially among the civilians, what are the legal and political mechanisms that are available to the Palestinian Authority or the Palestinian civil society to address the human rights violations that have been committed so far?
Mechanisms are plenty. You have to understand the situation on the ground in Gaza is in frank violation of international law, and that in itself is something that is flagrant and it needs no proof. I mean, so it is important that people should understand that the humanitarian side needs and requires very fast active action, action on the ground and at a very broad level, so as to make sure that the entire Gaza Strip is covered by this humanitarian aid. And of course, there are also international activity that can be conducted at the level of the international community, the European community, and I believe that the world community at large is able to put enough pressure on the Israeli counter side to be able to counteract this process of frank violation. But I must say the scene, as I can see it, is again a frank violation of international law and a frank violation of plain human rights, and maybe reorganizing the situation from within may be required, but that will require certainly some cooperation on the Palestinian side, which I'm sure that they will never delay in doing. But the Israeli insistence upon not providing any mechanisms that can help this is certainly compounding the problem. And the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are really in intense suffering.
Your point is very clear here, Dr. Tamara, and Dr. Tamara Haddad, political researcher. We thank you so much for your insights and thank you for being with us. And now we're back to Hala. Back to you, Hala.
Thank you very much, Mona. And continuing our bulletin, Philip Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, has called for an end to the conflict in Gaza and has condemned the Israeli ban on his organization. He stressed that dismantling UNRWA would deprive Palestinian children of education for the foreseeable future, emphasizing that reaching an agreement to end the war is the only way to bring hundreds of thousands of children currently living in the rubble back to school. UNICEF has called for the immediate cessation of attacks on civilians and humanitarian workers in Gaza. The UNICEF Executive Director, Catherine Russell, urged Israel to investigate the circumstances surrounding the attack on one of its staff members in Jabalia. She warned that recent weeks have seen a surge in violence in northern Gaza, putting all residents, especially children, at imminent risk from disease, famine, and ongoing bombardment. The World Health Organization has reported that an attack on a polio vaccination site in northern Gaza has left 6 people injured, including 4 children. The incident occurred at the Sheikh Radwan Primary Health Care Center, where parents had gathered to vaccinate their children. According to the WHO, a humanitarian ceasefire had been agreed upon to ensure safe vaccination efforts, but the site was struck regardless. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom described the incident as extremely concerning, but did not specify responsibility for the attack. Today marks the end of the third phase of the second round of the emergency polio vaccination campaign in Gaza City. The campaign has not been extended to northern Gaza, which is currently under intense Israeli siege. Starting last Saturday, the campaign aimed to vaccinate children under 10 years old and has provided the second dose of the vaccine. Moving on to the latest developments in Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
The Lebanese news agency reported that 2 individuals were killed and others were injured in an Israeli airstrike on a town in southern Lebanon. The Israeli aircraft also conducted multiple airstrikes targeting the eastern Zotar area and several villages in the Bint Jbeil district. The Israeli occupation army has issued new evacuation orders to residents of several buildings in Baalbek, eastern Lebanon, claiming that they are near Hezbollah facilities that will be targeted in the near future. This comes after the Israeli army announced the assassination of senior Hezbollah leaders in the Khiyam area of southern Lebanon. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard has warned the United States and Israel that Tehran will respond decisively to recent Israeli attacks. In a speech, the commander of the Revolutionary Guard asserted that Iran is prepared for any aggression and noted that Israeli officials violate all international norms and agreements. And now we move on to the latest developments in the United States, days ahead of the presidential election.
We will build what I call an opportunity economy.
We will make America great.
We're ready to fight for it. As one people, we are moving forward.
We will make America safe again.
Former United States President Donald Trump has claimed that he entered the race to save the U.S. economy from obliteration. These statements came during a rally in Salem, Virginia. The Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin joined Trump on stage, encouraging residents to support Trump, saying that Trump will help the country recover the greatest economy in the world.
And restore it to strength, prosperity, and greatness again. I will do a real job for you. I'm going to work my ass off for you.
Supporters of Republican nominee Donald Trump have participated in a car parade in Maricopa County, Arizona. Departing from Morristown and heading to Phoenix, they displayed Trump flags and campaign decorations, honking and cheering along the 90-kilometer route. With the election just 3 days away, they urged fellow Republicans and undecided voters to cast their ballots for Trump. As the 2024 U.S. presidential race nears its end, Trump and Harris are campaigning intensively in battleground states.
The 2024 U.S. presidential race is entering its final days, with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris intensifying their campaigns across key battleground states in a tight contest. Trump recently held rallies in North Carolina and Pennsylvania, aiming to consolidate support in conservative strongholds. Kamala Harris, in contrast, has focused on mobilizing voters in Michigan and Boston, where she received strong backing. Voter turnout has surged to historic levels in early voting, with Georgia alone reporting over 4 million ballots cast, potentially reducing election day turnout as many have already voted. High early voting numbers are being reported nationwide, reflecting significant engagement from both Democrats and Republicans. In a notable shift from previous years, Trump has actively promoted early voting among his supporters, which has likely contributed to increased Republican turnout in early ballots. With just days remaining, both candidates delivered their closing argument. Harris made a surprise appearance on Saturday Night Live, aiming to connect with a broader audience. The race remains highly competitive, with polls showing a narrow margin and emphasizing that every vote will count on November 5th.
Moving on to economic news, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva have discussed implementing Egypt's economic reform program, which is underway in partnership with the IMF. According to presidential spokesman Ambassador Ahmed Fahmy, President el-Sisi emphasized the importance of recent regional and international crises, which have significantly affected Egypt's dollar resources and budget revenues. President el-Sisi highlighted that the government prioritizing easing economic pressures on citizens by tackling inflation and rising prices, while also focusing on attracting investment and empowering the private sector to drive employment and growth. In Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's meeting with the IMF, the organization's managing director, Kristalina Georgieva, expressed strong appreciation for Egypt's recent efforts and its carefully implemented reform program, which prioritizes support for the most vulnerable groups. She praised the progress in Egypt's macroeconomic indicators despite the significant current challenges. Georgieva affirmed her full understanding of the major challenges Egypt faces amid regional and global developments, noting that the IMF aims to find optimal reform paths that consider all aspects. She also noted that the goal is to protect the positive outcomes of Egypt's reforms, particularly the improvements in overall economic indicators. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we have been covering. An Israeli airstrike on the Gaza Strip kills more than 23 civilians, including 13 in the northern region. UNICEF calls for an immediate cessation of attacks on civilians and humanitarian workers in Gaza. And the Iranian Revolutionary Guard warns the United States and Israel that Tehran will respond decisively to recent Israeli attacks. And this concludes our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EG to stay informed. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.